Let's get started. So, we're talking about objections today. The reason why I have a picture of a balloon here is that I think, like, if you think about your personal life and you think about the things that you are resistant to doing, and for me, for a long time, that was, my wife, Sarah, she's a much more fun person than I am, likes to have a lot more fun in her, especially in our personal lives. And something that I procrastinate a lot and am resistant to is just trying new things. I can be really stubborn with that. And one of the things that, doesn't help if someone's trying to get me to try new things is for if I say I'm tired, don't really want to do it, if someone comes at that with, well, hey, it's not that big of a deal, it won't take that much time, when they start to logically explain to me why I should be more open minded, it sort of adds air to that balloon and creates this tension. And it's the same thing that we do to prospects when we try to give them a rebuttal to an objection. When I don't feel acknowledged that I'm tired, don't want to try this thing, whatever it might be, had a bad experience, when I don't feel acknowledged, it adds air to this balloon and creates this tension versus deflating the balloon. So if I've had a long work day, for example, and a friend's trying to hang out, and it's like, hey, dude, sounds like you've had a long day. Totally get if you don't want to, go and grab beers or whatever. I'm much more likely to listen to that message and to talk to them because I feel acknowledged and understood. So what we want to do when we're objection handling is we really want to deflate that balloon, release the tension from the conversation. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So before we dig in, you guys have already kind of been working with through the chat. I like to be super interactive with this, so I'm going to be prompting you a lot to participate. All of that's really great. That's going to help you get more from this session today. The other thing too is if you have a question, which many of you will have, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom. If you can do your best to throw it in there, I'll try to get to as many of those questions as I can. No promises on getting to your specific question necessarily if we run out of time, but we're going to talk about objections. So let's dig in. So let me know in the chat, and this will set up everything today. We're talking about how to handle objections, but I'm really curious from you in the chat. If you could only prevent objections, so let's say you were not allowed to handle an objection on a cold call. So if a prospect said, not interested, we already have a solution, whatever it might be, if you were not allowed to handle the objection, how would that change the way that you approach cold calling? Share it with me in the chat. Gaurav said they would ditch the pitch. What else? Let me know in the chat. What would change about how you cold call if you could not actually handle objections, you could only prevent them? Yeah, all kinds of interesting things. I don't know if anyone's ever really thought of this objection handling like this, but I think this piece is actually more important. So getting straight to the point, Tyler says, I would only ask questions with a yes answer. You could redirect it. Some people would just make more calls. You would say, hey, if I'm going to get more objections, I would just make more calls if I can't handle it. Yeah, Alexander says preempt them. Yeah, follow up with an email, focus on need, be more blunt, bring up the objection to them. Yeah, Dan says, never thought of that, but this will require in-depth research about the prospect. Be as human as possible, Haley says. So, what's kind of interesting is, again, I'm going to talk to you about how to handle objections, but what I really hope that you take away by the end of this is how you can prevent those objections from even happening in the first place. It's really about preventing the objection from happening. So I've done previous webinars on messaging, cold emails, cold calling. We've talked about not using an elevator pitch and instead using a priority drop. So talking less about yourself and talking more about them, you're going to get fewer objections if you do that. So nothing I share today, I don't want you to think it's like magic tricks and things like that that are going to solve all of your objection issues. Really what I'm hoping you'll take away from this is that you'll understand more about where the objection's coming from so that you can handle it on the spot, but so that you can prevent it in the future. So I want to talk a little bit real quick. I have a quick story about a guy, Joel. This is someone that participated in one of our boot camps. This is like, kind of way back. But let me know if you relate to this in any way. The problem that Joel was running across was that, and a lot of you at the beginning of this said that you procrastinate your cold calls. So I'm kind of curious if this might be one of the reasons why. But he was apprehensive to pick up the phone because the IT executives he was selling to at Databricks, they would throw all kinds of objections at him that he didn't know how to handle. We already have a solution in place. We're using one of your competitors. I don't have time right now. This is not on our roadmap. Call me back next quarter. He get all kinds of objections like that. And he was trained on how to handle, these objections. And one of the things that we worked on, and it's what I want to share with you today, is he actually came in with a different mindset of how could I just welcome the objection? And instead of deflecting them, how could I use empathy to disarm the prospect and really figure out what was holding them up? What he figured out is that the objection that they were sharing, they weren't really being super open with him, and he wasn't able to get them comfortable being open so that he could disarm them and actually understand where they're coming from and offer some sort of alternative. So what he started doing is using some of the frameworks I'm going to share with you today. But literally immediately after using some of this stuff that you're going to learn today, you're going to be able to use this to handle objections. You're going to be able to turn around some of those into meetings. So I want to help everyone here. If you're struggling with objections, I want to help you be a little bit more like Joel. So let's dig in. So the problem that I see with objections, one, I don't know about you, people love to say no. So we're getting a lot more no's from prospects because people just feel more comfortable saying no to salespeople, right? The second thing is that in a cold call, especially, I don't know if you relate with this, but when someone tells you something on a cold call, you have like a couple seconds to respond with something or to actually get some words out of your mouth that will, buy another 5, 10, 15 seconds. So it can feel like there's a timer running out, right? There's very little time to react. And also, the other thing that can be very challenging is, when a prospect is using a competing solution or doing it themselves in-house, there's this like, dude, if they only knew the grass was greener on the other side. Like if I could only convince them that the way that they're doing it is the hard way, the less effective way, the less profitable way, the more costly way, whatever it might be. So we have all of these kind of things that we want the prospect to understand. But here's the opportunity. And what I want to talk to you about today. What I want to talk to you about is how we can welcome objections instead of deflecting them, how we could treat the prospect more like we would a client. So if you think about that mentality here for a second, imagine the people that you're cold calling. When you get an objection, imagine if you treated that like getting an objection from a current client that you were maybe trying to upsell on something. If they said no to you, we probably wouldn't take it personally. It would be curious. Even if we knew that it would be a good fit, it would help them get even better results than they're getting right now by upgrading the package that they're in. Even if they said no, we would still be kind of curious because we know it would benefit them. We'd be curious as to maybe what's holding them back, right? We would approach this with some curiosity, and we would be comfortable talking to them about it. And they would be comfortable being open with us. So how could we come into this prospecting interaction treating this person a little bit more like a client? And the third thing is we have a really big opportunity to get super comfortable with no. So no in many, many cases just means not right now. So how can we get more comfortable with no? So there's 3 points that we're going to dig into here in a second, but I want to know from you personally so I can customize the content for everyone today. Share with me in the chat, where do you feel like you are having the most challenges with objections? So this could be specific objections that you're getting that you could throw into the chat. It could be your mindset around it, or maybe you don't feel confident handling objections. What do you personally, help me out in the chat here, where do you feel like you're having the most challenges with objections? Yeah, just not interested, gatekeeper objections. Yeah, Tanya, let me know more about what you mean by money paradigms. I'm curious what you mean by that. Yeah, Dan says the price and competition are cheap. We already have a solution. Now's not a good time. Where did you get my number? Graph says that's a common one. No budget, not a priority. I'm in a meeting. Yeah, Andrew says I'm afraid to give the incorrect response that will result in failure. Definitely hear you there. Yeah, we use your competitor. We're all set. And to be clear today, we're going to be talking about objections that we encounter during the prospecting motion when we're doing outbound. So cold emailing, cold calling, that sort of thing. Yeah, call me back. I have to think about it. Not enough money right now. I don't want to talk to you. Victor, do people say that to you? I don't want to talk to you right now. That's rough if they do. You got some feisty prospects. Yeah, I'm not the person who handles that. We don't need your services. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. So the good thing is that we're going to cover just about every one of these objections through a framework that I'm going to share with you. Yeah, is this a cold call, Jared says? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to share three things with you today. One, we're going to talk about how can we get better objection handling by just being a better listener. So I'm going to talk to you about reading between the lines and assumptions that we can make about what our prospect is actually thinking. The second thing that we're going to talk about is a framework I'm going to run you through to show the prospect that you understand where they're coming from so that we can pitch a meeting instead of our solution. If you're getting objections like, we already do that, we already have one of those, we do this in-house, you're probably talking too much about your solution instead of talking about a next step, a meeting, what they could learn from that. And we'll talk tactically what that might sound like. So let's talk about this listening part. So there's a really good book called You're Not Listening, and it referenced this study from Princeton. So Princeton did this study, and they looked at when two people are communicating successfully, the listener's brain responds in a similar way to this speaker's brain. And essentially what the brain waves do is they start to mirror each other. So have you ever heard someone say, hey, I just don't really feel like I'm in sync with you, or you're having a conversation and it just doesn't really seem to be flowing? It's usually because you are not connecting with that person and your brain waves are literally not syncing up with each other. So when we say get in sync, like I want to sync up with this person, that comes from our brain waves. So one of the things that we can do to get in sync with our prospects is to listen better and to acknowledge where they're coming from. So our goal is to get in sync as quickly as possible. So here's how we can do that. So I'm going to prompt you guys with a couple questions to get you thinking. All right. So for those of you that shared objections in the chat, what I want you to respond with, so if you said, I'm not the person who handles that, or I'm busy right now, or I'm not interested, what I want you to do in the chat right now is write down, what do you think the prospect is thinking that they're not telling you? So when they say not interested, I get that's the part that comes out of their mouth. What are they thinking that they are not telling you? Who are you? Telling you what they want for lunch? Potentially, yeah. I don't know about you. I'm starting to get hungry. It's not even lunchtime yet. Just another salesperson, no value to me. Ooh, I'm concerned you don't have my best interest in mind. I don't care. Andrea says, I don't have time to talk. How long is this going to take? I don't want to be sold. Oh, another sales call. Why are you wasting my time? Your position is weak, no value. Oh God, another sales call, just another sales guy. Not a cold call again. I have things to do right now. This is not a priority. I have 5 more things. Okay. So what we can do here is if we think in the moment, and when you practice this, you'll get pretty quick at this. One of the keys here is that if we can state back to the prospect what we think that they might be thinking, that allows us to sync up with them quicker. So if someone says not interested, and again, I'm kind of skipping ahead here. I'm going to walk you through a framework that'll help you digest this a little bit better and give you more of a step-by-step way to think about it. But when someone says not interested, it's really just a reflexive response that they might give if they're busy, or they don't really see the need to talk to you, or maybe they're taken care of. And if we just simply state back when someone says not interested, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. Hey, sounds like you might be working on a lot of other stuff right now, right? People said, this is not of value to me. So let's say the prospect said, we already have a solution. What they might be thinking is like, this isn't valuable to me because we already have something in place. You could say, hey, sounds like the value is just not there for you, which makes sense because you have a solution in place right now that sounds like you're pretty happy with. I'm literally going to state back what I think is on their mind. Now, what might happen is we might miss. Anyone thinking that? Well, hey, Jason, if I make an assumption about what they're thinking and I say that thing back to them, I could say the wrong thing. Isn't that bad to make assumptions? And normally we wouldn't approach it quite like this if it were a sales call because we have more time, but in a cold call, you guys have seconds. What typically will happen is if you're trying to understand where the prospect's coming from and you're restating back what you think they might be thinking, they'll actually correct you if you're wrong. And that's a good thing. That means they're engaged. They're having a conversation. Yeah, Aaron says, empathize with how they are feeling. Exactly. This is not a touchy feely, kind of like, oh yeah, talk about their feelings. I just want to restate what's on their mind. Okay? Exactly. Ian, I don't think it's too big of a stretch either. So again, the first thing that you're going to train your mind to do, this is what I want you to start thinking, especially for you full cycle sales reps, you AEs on here, or people doing full cycle sales that are in selling emotion too. Really try to read between the lines. When someone says not interested or, hey, we already got this, really try to read between the lines of what they're thinking that they're not telling you. Here's the next one. The question behind the question. Okay. So I was working with a company, really great group of folks, one of my favorite clients, and they sell a staffing solution. They're not recruiters though. So they're not placing applicants for people. They have this really cool software that's essentially a marketplace for companies to be able to hire on-demand, seasonal staff. So these are people that can come to warehouse folders and warehouses, and they can staff up and down like during the holidays when things are really busy, etc. But one thing they always get asked when they cold call is, are you a staffing company? And what's really easy to start doing when you get asked those questions is to just say, no, we're actually not a staffing company. We do X, Y, and Z. We go immediately into what we do. What's actually a better thing to do is, instead of defending yourself and saying, we're not a staffing company, is, hey, I could totally fair question. Sounds like you guys might be working with a staffing company right now. And one of the things that we hear with that is like, hey, we've tried a bunch of different solutions like this, and they tend to either be too expensive or maybe they don't get you the applicants that they promised. I'm really curious, what kind of experience do you have working with staffing companies right now? And then we can go in and redirect that and answer that objection later. And I'll talk about how to do that. But I want to ask you guys in the chat, what questions do you get asked during a cold call? Because when someone says, are you a staffing company? Really what they're thinking, the question behind the question is, if you're a staffing company, why should I talk to you when we've already tried this and it hasn't worked, right? So let me know in the chat, what question do you get asked? Yeah, what's this about? How much is this going to cost me? What are you selling? So think about some of these questions. So who exactly are you? The question behind that question is, dude, are you credible? Who are you? Do you work with people like me? What's your company? Like, it's a credibility kind of thing that people want to know, right? So a lot of times people will answer that question with what we do instead of really addressing the root cause of the problem that the person's bringing up, right? So how'd you get this number? So Bob, in the case of Bob, how'd you get this number? What's the person really asking? Dude, why the heck are you calling me, man? Why the heck are you calling me? How long is this going to take? Why should I pay attention to what you have to say right now? Right? It's skeptic, right? Yeah. Yeah, why would I go with you when I have something like this in place? We already do this. Yeah, we already do this. The question is, well, hey, I spent all of this time personally implementing this solution. Why would I want to do that all over again? So you guys get where we're going here? People are asking you questions, but you got to think about what is the question behind the question that person is asking. So how much is this? Hey, is the value here? Is this going to be worth changing what we're doing right now? Is this worth spending hours, dozens of hours implementing with you, spending a bunch of money, etc.? So the question behind the question. Yeah, Javier, is my time worth this? How does this improve my current state? Exactly. Those are the questions that people are really asking that we have to answer. And again, I'll show you how we answer those here in a second. The last thing that you could do here when it comes to listening is really understand the emotion behind what they're saying. So if someone says, hey, we already have a solution, that's a lot different way of saying that, oh, we're already taken care of. When someone responds in the we're already taken care of tonality, that's not really inviting much of a conversation, is it? versus, we're already taken care of. It sounds like they might be a little apprehensive about what their current solution is. It's enough for me to want to dig in a little bit. Not interested versus, you know what, I'm not really interested. Those are two totally different ways of saying the same thing, and they can mean very different things too. So the key with cold calling especially is that you feel comfortable enough with your script and your talk track that you could really listen. That's what I love about cold calling, is that since you can't see the person, you can really tune into what they sound like, right? Their tonality. Yeah, Mike said, people know what they think, but they live what they feel. I really like that. That's a tweetable thing there, Mike. Okay, so that's the listening part. All right. So what's the prospect thinking about that they're not telling you? What is the question behind the question? And what is the emotion behind what they're saying? So we need to put our listening cap on, okay? And before I get to these frameworks, I want to walk you through one more thing. So the next thing that we do, once we are able to talk to and think about what might be on their mind, what they might actually be thinking, is I want to show them that we understand. And I also want to like redirect the conversation, not to our solution and like what we're selling and all this other stuff, but to talk about the meeting. Okay. So here's what we want to do. Let me stop sharing here. And we're going to work through some of these objections together. Okay. We're actually going to go straight to the framework here. Okay. So what we want to do, there's really three parts to handling these objections. The very first thing that we want to do is show the prospect that we understand. All right. So the first step is empathize. Then we're going to validate. So I'm going to let the prospect know that I understand where they're coming from, and then I'm going to let them know that it's okay to feel or have the opinion that they have, any of that kind of stuff. I'm going to let them know that that's okay. So if someone says not interested and they don't want to talk to me, I'm going to say, sounds like I'm going to catch you in the middle of something. Totally fair if now's not a good time to chat. I'm going to let them know it's okay if they don't want to chat right now. And by giving them that choice, it actually opens up a lot of other opportunity for us, which we'll talk about here in a second. So I want to empathize and then validate. And depending on the type of objection, I might need to do a combination of those two things in a bit of a cycle. And doing those two things allows me to, one, disarm the prospect, and then two, it allows me to understand where they're coming from. Okay, so what I want to do first is let's work through a couple of these more shallow objections. I call them brush-offs. So let's work through, and let me pull some stuff up here. I have a worksheet that I'm going to share with you guys here in a second too. Okay, so let's go through this. We're going to just focus on this empathize and validate piece first. Let's use not interested or any variation of that objection as an example. So examples of that might be not interested, I'm busy, call me back, I'm in a meeting right now, I'm about to head into a meeting, which I find hilarious. It's like every prospect that we call is about to head into a meeting, right? So what are some of the things? Help me out in the chat here. When someone says not interested or I'm busy, call me back, what do you think that they might be thinking that they are not saying? And then I'm going to write down some of these things and coach you guys through how you can respond to this. Yep, not a priority. I want to get off the phone. Yeah, keep them coming. I hate being sold to. So we could do another salesperson. I'm actually going to copy this so that we can have another version of this. I thought you were someone else. Not in the mood. Why did I pick up the phone? Never heard of you. Not the right person. Okay. So we got a bunch of different variations, it looks like, of the same thing. So one of the statements that we can just make is we can start this off with sounds like. I'm just going to restate back to the prospect what I think is on their mind. So when prospect says, yeah, not interested. Hey, sounds like you might be busy. Validate. And I'm sure the last thing you wanted to do is take a cold call from a salesperson. Or I think Nick Sigelski came up with this line. I'm not sure if he's the right person to give credit to, but I didn't come up with this. Hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something, and you hate taking cold calls as much as I hate making them. So he uses that line a lot. That I think that's pretty cool. So I'm going to empathize, validate, and to validate, I might have a statement that maybe starts out something like this. Totally understandable. Hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. Totally understandable since I'm cold calling you in the middle of your day out of the blue here. That's it. Or sounds like I might have caught you off guard, which is totally understandable because I'm calling you randomly in the middle of your day. The exact words you guys use here is not as important as using that framework and then empathizing, talking to what you think might be on their mind, and just doing a simple validation, letting them know that they're not crazy for thinking that. All right. So empathize, validate, and then the last part of this here is offer. So this is where I'm going to make and ask for, let's say, next steps. I might talk about a potential way that I can help them, whatever it might be. There's usually two kind of options here. So I might go, option number one is I might just do another permission-based opener. So that's if I get the objection early in the call. So let's say I call and I'm like, hey, Jason with Blissful Prospecting. And then maybe the person cuts me off at the beginning and says, oh, not interested. I'm going to say, hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. Totally understandable. I'm just going to redo my permission-based opener. Hey, like I said, sounds like I'm catching you in the middle of something here, but you got 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling? And you can let me know if you want to keep chatting after that. So if it's early in the call, I'm going to use another permission-based opener. Yeah, Matt says, trying to make them laugh within the first 5 to 10 seconds of catching them on the phone. Hey, am I your 43rd call this morning? Yep, any way that you can inject humor is totally fair. All right, and the stance that I'm taking, the posture that I'm taking is really like I am a peer to this person. I'm not subservient to the prospect. I'm just going to talk to them like a peer, and I'm going to be okay with them not wanting to talk to me. And by bringing that kind of energy into the conversation, like, hey, I did some research on you. I have some stuff I think that might be helpful, but you might not want to be helped. And that's totally okay. If you can come in with that type of energy, people are going to be so much more willing to talk to you. Okay. So the next type of offer that you can do too, this is the one that I like. This might be a long shot. And essentially what I'm going to do here is share a quick story. Oops. Okay. And that's going to sound something like this. So let's say that the objection comes a little bit later. So I did my permission-based opener. Maybe you give your pitch, whatever it might be, and the person's like, we're really not interested. Hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. Hey, sounds like you might be taken care of. Sounds like you might have something in place. Any variation of that. Totally understandable because I'm calling you out of the blue in the middle of your day here. But hey, this might be a long shot. But you reminded me of the sales team or the AE team over at a couple other companies, large software companies that I'm working with. And one of the problems that they were dealing with is they wanted to get their AEs to do more outbound. They just didn't have a playbook for it. And they weren't able to kind of offset the inbound lead flow that they were getting so they could proactively break into new accounts. Am I totally off in thinking that's something that you might relate with, or would it hurt to share a little bit more? So I'm going to share a quick customer story, just real quick. And I'm going to copy and paste this is what that looks like. I'm going to share a worksheet with you guys too that'll have this, but that's kind of the framework that I'm running through. Empathize. Sounds like I'm at a caution in the middle of something. Validate. I can totally understand why now might not be the best time to chat if that's the case, but hey, this might be a long shot. You reminded me of I'm just thinking of a client example. You reminded me of the manufacturing team over at ABC Company. And one of the things they were struggling with right now was just hiring welders. I noticed that you have 3 welders, positions open for welders right now, and they're just having a heck of a time hiring those, and it was backing up their production. Are you totally good to go in this area, or would it be a bad idea to share some insights into how you guys might be able to overcome that problem? Any version of that's going to work pretty well. You guys see that the formula for that story is I was working with someone like you who wanted to accomplish this thing but was having this problem. It looks like, and then personalization. You could see that I didn't follow that specifically word for word. It wasn't super formulaic, but I want to do something like that. And then are you totally good to go here, or would it be a bad idea to share some insights into what other manufacturers are doing to deal with the labor shortage right now? All right, so I want to pause here. What are you taking away so far? Let me know in the chat. We're going to go through a couple different variations of objections like this. Let me know in the chat. What are you taking away so far? Yeah, Daniel, I love it. You reminded me of this other small family law firm who was handling their daily operations manually, and they're spending like 10 hours a month to complete their billing. And it was just causing a lot of problems. Is that something you're totally good to go with, or would it be a bad idea to share how other small law firms are reducing a lot of that manual work so they can just actually focus more on increasing their billable hours? I'm totally winging that, Daniel, but you kind of get the point. Yeah, not being pushy, Matt says. Kathleen, being empathetic to their objection. They won't listen until you disarm them, Selena says. Make it about them and not about me. Yeah, let me know. We got a bunch of people on the call today. Let me know in the chat. What are you taking away so far from this framework and how you might be able to apply it? Share it with me in the chat. Yeah, be okay with a no. By this time, you guys, it shouldn't surprise you when you get a no, right? It should not surprise you. Expect the no. Yeah, Abhishek. Beyonce is belting out listen in my head. So induce some FOMO, validate. Hannah asked, do you find permission-based openers get you shut down? Would love to hear a slight pivot in that scenario. I don't find personally that the permission-based opener shuts me down. 9 times out of 10, you should get a yes to that permission-based opener. A lot of it's your tonality. So if I come in and say, hey, would it be a big deal if you got a minute? I know it's a lot to ask for, but just give me a minute. I'll share it with you, and then you can let me know if you want to chat. Like, that's a very different way than, hey, look, I know I'm catching in the middle of something here, but I did some research on you. You got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling, and then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting? I really want to really be firm with a prospect. I want to talk to them as if they are a peer. So a permission-based opener is not necessarily like I'm getting on my hands and knees and asking for permission. I'm just acknowledging the fact that I'm interrupting them. It's no different than if you were at an in-person event, you saw a group of people talking, you probably wouldn't just go up to the group of people and just start talking. If you interrupted, they'd be like, hey, sorry to interrupt you guys. You mind if I join the conversation? You can do that and still come off as a peer. It's the same thing. You're interrupting this person. Sure, they chose to pick up the phone, but they probably didn't think it was a salesperson. So you are interrupting them. You get to choose whether or not you are an interruption. All right. So Michael, you asked, what happens if they say no again after you try to rebut, ask for a better time? Dude, you might just give it up after that point, man. If they said no to you 2 or 3 times, maybe it's just not a good fit. You can follow up through email. Hey, all good. How about this? I can send you an email with this case study or this piece of content. We could follow up later, right? You don't always have to get a meeting from the interaction. So Tanya asked, what happens if you don't have a hardcore testimonial yet from the results you've created in that specific industry? You might talk about a client in a similar industry. So for example, I worked with a client that sells a lot into manufacturing, and they also sell into retail. Their case studies are not as strong in manufacturing. And a lot of times what they talk about is how manufacturers can take a more retail-oriented approach to customer service. So what I might say there is, hey, this might be a long shot, but you reminded me of the marketing team over at XYZ retailer or XYZ manufacturer, because they wanted to take a more retail-oriented approach to their customer experience. And one of the things that they wanted to do was XYZ, and this thing kept getting in the way. Is that something you guys are totally good to go with, or would it be a bad idea to share how manufacturers are adopting a more retail-oriented approach to customer experience? And again, I'm totally winging that on the spot, so I would want to have something probably a little better scripted out. But that's what I would do on the spot. Yeah, Tanya, you can always use someone else's story too. It doesn't have to be yours. Cool. Yep. So it's just a story. If you don't have the specific department or the company name, that's okay too. You could just say a retail team at a really large manufacturer that we're working with, or apparel company or whatever. Yeah. So, okay. Can you show us some more examples of the right tone and some things to say for permission-based openers? Yeah. You guys, permission-based openers are pretty simple. So in the beginning of the cold call, I'm going to do a permission-based opener. It looks like this: empathize, time plus permission. Empathize is I'm just going to say what I think the prospect is thinking. Sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. Time, but do you have 30 seconds, a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling? Permission, and then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. That's it. The tonality is exactly like that. I'm talking to you like a peer. I'm not talking super fast. Hey, Carla, I know I probably caught you in the middle of something, but do you got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling? And you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. Boom. Cool. All right. So I want to keep the train going on the objections. Okay, so let's go through a different example with the same framework here. And let me actually, I might have one that's already filled out. There we go. Okay, so let's use a different example. This is probably a really common one that people are coming across. We already have a solution. Okay. What I want your guys' help with here in the chat is, if we are going to empathize with the person and we're going to comment on what we think is on their mind that they're thinking but not telling you, help me out in the chat here. If someone says we already have a solution, what are they thinking that they are not saying? Yeah. So why not? Why do people, why are they so reluctant to change? A lot of you commented that. Yeah. Change is a lot of time and effort, and it costs money. And if that person's a typical champion, maybe in the sales cycle, it's a lot of work for them. Yeah, there's risk. If it's not broke, why fix it? Fear. Yeah, dude, you guys are totally spot on here. What I find that's really interesting, by the way, is that when I work with sales reps, you guys already kind of have the answers in your head. What I'm trying to do is just unpack it into a really simple framework that you can use. So I'm scared my boss will yell at me, Vincent says. Yeah, no one wants to think that they're doing something wrong. Yeah, there's a lot of inherent shame in admitting that you made a bad decision. So you might be talking to the person that decided to bring that vendor in, right? So if someone already has a solution, they're thinking like, dude, this is a lot of time, energy, risk, right? It's a lot of work. Don't want to be wrong. And then there's maybe budget here. Okay, so let's just work through this and have a little bit of fun with it. So if someone says, hey, we already have a solution, I'm just gonna be like, sounds like you might be taken care of. And then for the validate piece, I could do a bunch of different things. So I'm going to, again, make them feel like it's perfectly okay that they don't want to talk to me because they already have a solution in place. Sounds like you might be taken care of. And you know what? Change takes a lot of time and energy, and there's certainly risk in changing solutions. I'm just going to validate that. Totally understandable since, as you know, it takes a lot of time and energy, and there's some risk associated with changing. Or you could say, totally understandable. I noticed that you've been in this position for about 10 years, and you've probably put a lot of thought into this. So I also like using a little bit of flattery if it's sincere. So if you on LinkedIn notice the amount of time that the person's worked at the company, you could say that too. Hey, sounds like you might be taken care of, Tanya. And I noticed that you've been doing this for about 10 years. So I imagine you've probably put a lot of thought into this. I'm going to agree with them. I'm not going to try to tell them that what they're doing is wrong. You guys getting that? We're not going to tell them what they're doing is wrong. Now, the offer piece, this part's kind of interesting. I like to do a love-hate type of approach here. So what this is going to involve is I want to know what the competing solution is and what people tend to like about it, and then what people tend to not like about it. So if you sell software, for example, one of the ways that you can find this is either through customer feedback, of course, or you can get onto a site. Let me share it in the chat. G2.com is a really cool place to look at your competitors' solutions and what prospects say that they like and dislike about that solution if you don't already know about it. So I'll give you an example. So I worked with a company whose one of their biggest competitors is Microsoft Teams. So what people would say is, oh, we already have Teams. You're like, hey, sounds like you already have a solution in place that you're happy with. And I know it's kind of a lot of work to change the way that everyone communicates internally. So totally understandable. So I empathize and validate. The offer piece is, again, I like to do that might be a long shot, or hey, if you're willing to share, and here's how I'm going to work that love hate statement into there. So I'm going to say something like this. Hey, this might be a long shot, but I'm really kind of curious because with Teams, what I've heard that people really like about it is that it just syncs with all of the stuff that your current tools that you're using. So the Outlook, the calendar, the email, all of that kind of stuff. But one of the things I hear that people say is not so great is that when people have to use their phone and hop on phone calls from their phone, it doesn't really work as well. The integration just doesn't play super friendly, and people are not able to join meetings. I'm really curious, what has your experience been? I'll give you another example. So with that company I've worked with that sells an automated welding solution. So hardware as a service, software as a service. One of the things that people might be doing is they might already be using a piece of software in-house and doing some welding. So if someone's like, oh yeah, we already have one of those solutions in-house. Hey, sounds like you might be taken care of. I know you guys are running a pretty big operation over there and you've been doing this for about 10 years. So I imagine you've put a lot of thought into this. I am curious if you're willing to share though, with people that are doing this in-house, one of the things that they really like about that is that they're able to customize everything fully to the extent that they want. But one of the things that they tend to run into issues with is they're still only able to automate about half of the production mix. And those larger, more customized, lower volume products are still stuff that they haven't been able to automate. I'm really curious, what's your experience been? So I'm going to be super specific. And again, I'm going to drop this into the chat and I'll share a worksheet with you guys here in a second. But that's a little bit more of like a formulaic way that I can do it. Okay, Elizabeth asked, how do you get comfortable with empathizing? I think one of the most important things is to take an authentic approach that fits with you and who you are. So if you're not used to this kind of approach, how do you get comfortable with empathizing and making it seem authentic? Practice in your personal life. Practice in your personal life. That's what I would do. So when someone brings you an objection in your personal life, if you have kids or if you have a spouse or your parents, and people are resistant to doing something, just call out what you think is on their mind and how they're feeling. Like if I'm sharing something with someone in my family and they're just not receiving the information well, I'll be like, hey, sounds like what I'm saying is not resonating. which is totally understandable because like I'm, it's kind of a critique of the way you're doing things, right? So I would practice this in your personal life if this feels unnatural to you. So I want to pause here. What are you guys taking away from this piece here? What are you guys taking away? So when someone says they already have a solution, what are you guys taking away around what you could do here? Share it with me in the chat. What are you taking away from this? Yeah, the market intelligence piece is pretty big, Dominic. Yeah, Wendy says tone is king. I think a lot of the tonality, Wendy, will just come from you practicing, you know? So when someone says, hey, we already have a solution, don't be alarmed by that. Bring some curiosity into the interaction. Yeah, be more sincere. Yeah, empathy and validation. Work towards keeping the conversation going. Yeah, just be yourself. Yeah, how to work with objections, Victor says, instead of overcoming them. Tell me more. Yeah, when someone's like, hey, I already have a solution. Hey, sounds like you might have something in place here that you're pretty happy with. And as you know, it's a lot of time and energy and risk to change. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about what you guys are doing that's working so well? That empathize and validate allows you to take the conversation in a bunch of different directions. Yeah, curiosity. Sound more like a consultant versus salesperson. Open-ended questions. Tell me. Yes. Cool. Being nice. Okay. Yeah, staying relaxed. Yeah, what if they say why? Oh, I'm just really curious what you guys are doing that's working well. Because sometimes what I hear, and I'll just go into the love hate. Sometimes what I hear is that people really like this about that, and sometimes they don't really care for this. I'm just curious what's your experience been. Yeah, this could work, Kelly, with email outreach, but when you get an objection through email, I would pick up the phone and call the prospect. So if someone says not interested to your email, I would pick up the phone and call them first because their phone number is going to be in their email signature. And I would be like, hey, Kelly, Jason was Blissful Prospecting. I know it might be kind of weird getting a call from me because you just responded to my email, not interested, but I did do some research on you guys. Is it cool if I take a minute to share what I found? And then you can let me know if this is something we should continue talking about later or maybe not even at all. So I'm going to call the person, take the conversation to the phone. All right. So let me share my screen. I'm going to drop this into the chat for you guys. So what I put together here is we got a little workbook. You got the frameworks that we went through today. And then you got some templates and things like that, and a little section where you could work out your own objection responses as well. So let me share this in the chat so that everyone here can get their hands on it. You're going to want to make sure to make a copy of this so that you have it. And what we can kind of do now is just open it up for a little bit of Q&A. We got, what, another probably 7-8 minutes here. Okay, so drop a question if you got it into the Q&A and I'll do my best to help you out here. So Matthias asked, some feel doing a little research before calling a prospect is not a good idea. Some think it is a good idea. If I read an article about the company and I feel my product can help them, when I call the prospect, I could say, hi, I just came across an article about your business challenge about XYZ, and I feel I may be able to help address your challenge. So what I would do, Matt, is I probably wouldn't come in saying, I think I can help resolve this address or address the challenge because you don't really know if they're going through that challenge or not. So what you could say is, hey, Matt, I just came across an article about a business challenge that people like you are facing right now. Can I take a minute to share a little bit more about how I think this might be impacting you? And then you could let me know if it makes sense for us to keep chatting. I would do that in the opener. Just get permission to share the thing that you found first, and then you can segue away from that. I don't like to just like tell people that I can help them. Think about how resistant you are to getting outside help on stuff. I always use personal training as an analogy. If a personal trainer came up to me at the gym and said, I think I could help you get into better shape, I'd be like, okay, you know, all right, that's a little weird, you know. I'm gonna be really resistant to like getting help from that person because I want to feel like I'm like good to go, So I need some acknowledgement around that. So Matt, hope that helps you out. Tyler, We're often preempting cold calls with a personalized email sequence. People might recognize your name when you call and know off the bat why you're calling. Does this validate their objection more? You could. Most of the time, I don't think the prospect is actually connecting the dots on the email to the phone call. Um, so if they say, "Hey, we already have one of those," I took a look at your email. Hey, totally fair. I'm really curious. What, if you don't mind sharing, what are you guys doing right now? What are you using? What are you doing to take care? What's working so well? Like I would find out what they're doing, and then you could validate the objection more. Sure, and then do that love hate piece that you can sequence in, uh, or segue to. Excuse me. There you go, Tyler. Okay, Lee says, I've received 10 other calls offering me the same things. What makes you so special? The thing that I like to do to talk about what makes me special is I just talk about what my clients say about me. So if someone's like, hey, we already, like, I get called about sales training all the time, and be like, hey, I'm totally fair. Sounds like you're getting hit up a lot. To be honest with you, I don't know if you need this. This would be something that we would need to explore in another call, but I'm happy to share what people have to say about working with us. One of the things that we do quite a bit different is we don't do shotgun style training. Our clients really appreciate that because we spread the training engagement out, the retention of the information is higher, and they typically get better results. And then I'm on the hook for coaching them and making sure they implement it versus just dumping a lot of really good information on them and expecting them to implement it. Does that sound like something that might be more your style and worth another conversation, or are you good to go right now? That's how I would handle something like that. Again, just kind of winging it. Um, let's see here. James says, I'm curious to know how you overcome an objection that comes in immediate response to the permission-based opener. Those 1 out of 10 times, they say not interested in time. Yeah, if someone says no to your permission-based opener, um, I would respect that and ask when you could call them back later. It happens so rarely that 1 out of 10 times that I would just totally respect that. They're probably legitimately busy. Hey, James, totally fair. I want to respect your time. How about I give you a call tomorrow around the same time? Would that work for you? Cool. Or how about I give you a call a little bit later this afternoon? I'll shoot you an email in the meantime. I would totally respect a person that, says no to my permission-based opener. That's the whole point. Okay, we got time for a couple more here. Drop your questions, you guys, in the Q&A if you can. That's kind of where I'm looking right now. Okay, Will ask, any recommendations on getting them to challenge status quo? This is what we've always done. Well, I think that customer story, that love hate, that this is what we've always done. Hey, totally hear ya. The reason I was giving you a call is that you guys reminded me a lot of this company that was dealing with this thing, and they just, it was really hard for them to switch, but they kept running into these problems. And what we're able to help them do was this. I get that I'm catching in the middle of your day here, but you got your calendar handy? Do you think maybe we could unpack that a little bit more, and I can share with you, kind of what we're doing, and you can decide from there if this is worth continuing to talk about. So I think the customer story is really big, Will. All right. Your thoughts about calling first over sending an email and making that call X days later. My thoughts, Vivek, are that you should do both at the same time. So when you email someone, they should also get a call from you. So maybe what you do before you make a cold calls, like during your cold call block, is you queue up, your emails to go out during that block, and you're making calls to those prospects as those emails are going out. I want to do both of those things at the same time. Tanya, I think that we covered your question. Okay, how do you handle objections about price if they reply to your initial email with a price objection without knowing the price? How do prospect do this because their existing system is free? So, I think Isabel, what you need to do is think about, well, what's someone thinking if they're like talking about price and they're getting something for free? They're thinking like, why would I pay for this when I get it for free? I would just say that. Hey, totally fair. It sounds like the existing system you're using is free, and it's a totally fair question to want to know, why should I pay for this? So one of the things that we found, and the reason why I reached out to you, is you're a lot like this company who was using, free products like this, and they were trying to accomplish this thing, and here's the thing they kept running into. And that's what we're able to help them with. And here was the result. Is there anything Are you guys totally good to go there, or do you think there's something that's worth exploring here? So make it about the client and like the problem they were having and the result you were able to get them. That's where I would direct the conversation, Isabel. Yeah, you guys bet. We are out of time, everyone. Super awesome engagement today. Love the questions. If you got a lot of value from what we talked about today, definitely make sure I'll drop this into the chat. Definitely make sure if we're not, definitely make sure to connect with me on LinkedIn. Check out our website. We got tons of free stuff on the website. We have courses, programs, all that kind of stuff too, if you're looking for some extra help. So make sure to connect with me on LinkedIn, check out the website, and I appreciate all of you. Hopefully this was super valuable for you, and we'll see you in a couple weeks when we do another webinar. Later.